Focus Explainer. Today, we are going to unpack a truly fascinating seminar that deconstructs extremist ideologies through three distinct, razor-sharp analytical lenses. We're going to take ideologies we constantly hear about in the news, strip away all that surface rhetoric, and examine them from the ground up. Whether you're deeply familiar with Middle Eastern geopolitics, or, just curious about how these ideas take root and spread like wildfire, this framework is going to offer a totally fresh perspective.
So where exactly is all this coming from? Well, the source material for our analysis today traces back to a very specific event. It was a Ramadan seminar held at the Ramses Hilton, organized by the Risalat al-Salam Global Foundation and sponsored by thinker Ali Mohammed Al-Shurafa Al-Hammadi. It brought together a huge mix of politicians, intellectuals, and security experts, and their main focus? A paper exploring the true message of the Quran and how it completely contrasts with the narratives pushed by extremist groups over the last century. We're going to track the seminar's exact flow through 5 key areas. First, Ramadan's message and drama. Second, the political exploitation of religion. Third, the clash of ideologies. Fourth, the alternative Quranic vision. And finally, the psychological lens on extremism. All right, let's jump right into Section 1. Ramadan's message and drama. Ramadan is traditionally seen as a time for deep spiritual reflection, right? A return to the peaceful, foundational texts of the faith. But in the modern era, it's also the absolute peak season for television dramas. The author makes this really interesting point that art and drama, specifically pointing to a series called Ras al-Afa, which translates to Head of the Viper, serve as vital tools. According to the seminar, this kind of media is absolutely crucial for exposing false narratives and countering historical revisions spread by extremist organizations. It's really about using the sheer power of storytelling to dismantle lies from massive audiences. Now, to truly get to the bottom of the critique presented in the seminar and that TV series, the author introduces a 3-tiered framework. Think of this like a giant puzzle designed to completely deconstruct how groups like the Muslim Brotherhood operate. By breaking their history and influence down into the political, the ideological, and the psychological levels, the author gives us a roadmap to see exactly what's going on under the hood. Let's look at that first level in Section 2, political exploitation of religion. This isn't about religion in a vacuum. It's about religion being used as a chess piece. According to the source, extremist organizations have historically been utilized in these massive global and regional power struggles. The text traces a timeline showing how these groups functioned as tools against national independence movements in the Middle East. For example, back in the 1950s and 60s, the author notes they were used to oppose Egyptian independence under President Gamal Abdel Nasser. The framework then follows this thread right through the geopolitical shifts of the mid-90s, all the way to the 2010s, arguing they actively exploited the Arab Spring to serve broader strategies of global hegemony. So it frames them not as pure religious movements, but as highly opportunistic political actors. Which brings us to Section 3, the clash of ideologies. This is the second tier, and it brilliantly illustrates the core conflict. The text strictly contrasts 2 entirely different interpretations of Islamic texts, showing how the exact same words can be twisted to serve vastly different ends. It's literally a night and day difference. On one side, the author starkly outlines the ideology of Sayyid Qutb, a foundational thinker for many extremist groups. The source describes Qutb's worldview as one of takfir, which means declaring others non-believers, and hakimiyya, a really rigid totalitarian concept of governance. It basically divides the world into a realm of Islam and a Dar al-Harb, or house of war, effectively monopolizing the concept of salvation. Contrast that with Al-Shurafa's reading. He asserts that the Quran fundamentally champions universal peace, human cooperation, and tolerance. In his view, salvation is tied to personal piety and good deeds, absolutely not to membership in some specific political or militant faction. Moving on to Section 4, the alternative Quranic vision. So the crucial point the author makes here is that the solution to this huge ideological clash lies in returning directly to a peaceful, uncorrupted reading of the Quran, stripping away centuries of politically motivated interpretations. The text asserts that this original vision actually liberates humanity from clerical control. According to the seminar, the true message totally rejects this dangerous idea of the saved sect. The notion that only one specific group is going to heaven while everyone else is condemned. Instead of the fear, violence, and guardianship allegedly used by groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, this vision embraces human diversity, mutual acquaintance, and cooperation. It's centered entirely on promoting justice, mercy, and support for the vulnerable. And finally, Section 5. The psychological lens on extremism. This brings us to the final tier of the framework, and honestly, this might be the most revealing part of the whole analysis. The author poses a fantastic question. If the original text is so focused on peace and mercy, why in the world do certain figures misinterpret it so violently? Well, the seminar's answer is deeply psychological. The author argues forcefully that figures like Sayyid Qutb and later leaders like Mahmud Ezzat weren't driven by genuine piety at all. Instead, the text claims they were driven by deep psychological instability, consumed by revenge, inferiority complexes, and hatred. According to the source, these toxic internal states are what actually produced a fake, forged version of the religion, one designed just to justify their own destructive urges. Let's break down exactly how that psychological pipeline works as outlined by the source. Step 1 often involves a really profound personal rejection. The author cites a specific historical claim here, that Sayyid Qutb's radicalization stemmed from being denied a government ministerial post by President Nasser. Then, step 2 is the cultivation of a deep inferiority complex. The text suggests Qutb felt inadequate compared to his intellectual peers at the time, folks like Taha Hussein or El-Akkad, and he desperately needed a way to assert dominance. And that leads to step 3, weaponizing religious texts. Actually, it's like a domino effect. The author argues that these personal failures mutated into a retaliatory religious doctrine. Basically, they use the cover of religion to exact revenge, destroy infrastructure, and try to seize the power and status they felt they were denied in the first place. Ultimately, Al-Shurafa's framework concludes that the state of the human mind interpreting the text is just as important as the text itself. I mean, think about it. A healthy, stable, and peaceful psychological state is absolutely necessary to accurately interpret and apply a message of peace and security. When a person's mind is clouded by a desire for vengeance, the resulting ideology is inevitably going to be violent and destructive, completely regardless of the original source material. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the thought to ponder. When we strip away all the religious vocabulary of extremist movements and look at their history strictly through the lenses of political ambition and human psychology, the inferiority complexes, the personal vendettas, the geopolitical maneuvering, how does it change our understanding of what is truly religious versus what is merely a personal quest for power? It's a powerful framework that really forces us to look past what people say they believe and examine why they are actually saying it.
مؤسسة رسالة السلام العالمية، رسالة إنسانية لعالم أكثر سلاماً.